Great. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for coming back after the break. And I'd like to welcome on stage our panelists. Cantor from Verizon. A round of applause, please, whilst they're strolling up to the podium. Take a seat, Oliver. Eric Loos from BICS. And Stefan Walraven from Inmanta. Please take a seat. I guess I'll sit down as well. It's been a long day. How are you enjoying it so far? Has it been a good show? Good. That's an enthusiastic response. I'd like to hear. Let's kick off with you, Eric. So BICS, for those of you who aren't familiar with, it's a Belgian-based but international wholesale telecom provider. It's not a mobile operator per se, but you do play a very important role in international mobile roaming. And I'd be interested to hear a little bit more about that, and also specifically, as this panel is meant to be about 5G, how does 5G roaming differ from 4G roaming? What are the new sort of technical challenges that you've had to face? And also, how does this connect with the topic of orchestration, which we're also meant to be talking about in terms of the delivery of the services? If you could start us off with that, please, Eric, and then we'll get Stefan and Oliver to chime in.
All right, I'll try. I usually notice that I come from a very, very specific viewpoint in such discussions, being a wholesale carrier which helps other operators connect to each other. We're the largest roaming and signaling provider in the world, or at least top 3, depends on who you ask, I guess. And in 3G and 4G roaming, we've managed to help a lot of smaller tier 2 players, tier 3 players in countries to interconnect to the global roaming space by providing products like one-stop shop, single, dual IMSI platforms, instant roaming kind of platforms. But this is not the route that the GSMA is taking now with 5G, which is really having networks talk directly to each other without an intervening partner. And this works well for very big operators. But you can imagine that a small operator from Belgium, let's take it, if they try to set up a roaming relationship with China, how far they are down the queue in actually getting that done. So in the past, there were 3G and 4G solutions that covered for this. And in the 5G space, this has not really emerged yet. So we are looking at how this is evolving. And one of the options that we see is to look at managed hosted SEPs, so that we would manage the roaming infrastructure on behalf of the smaller operators, and that we would probably pre-agree the roaming relationships for them. We do managed services in roaming for certain customers. Now, this ties in with automation because, of course, we would have to instantiate a hosted SEP for every customer, because it's not a hub model, which means that to do that at the scale we have about 1,000 mobile operators connected. So, of course, not all of them would take a hosted SEP with us, but imagine it's a few hundred. Then we would need to find ways to make sure that this remains stable. So that means that your changes have to be repeatable. They have to be solid. If you do many changes a day, even a 1 or 2% failure rate is going to be too much. So that's where automation and certainty in your deployment and doing the right roles, doing checks that everything worked well and rolled back is going to be important. So the automation plays a big role. And then if you think about maybe we are also an IPX provider, providing the dedicated paths between two operators for a 5G slice, for instance, if this is a customer demand. And then this ties in with the overall orchestration. If a customer wants it, and that you can maybe provision it on the other side, so that you sort of do like the MEF has played an important role in doing this for carrier Ethernet, and they're now taking up 5G, so maybe that's something that we will explore.
Okay, interesting. And Stefan, I understand that Inmanta, your company has been quite closely involved in this project and enabling the end-to-end network and service orchestration for BICS. Can you tell us a little bit about how that project's been going? What have been the key milestones, the challenges you faced, sort of benefits that you've been able to achieve so far?
Yeah, so since we started working together in 2020, we actually delivered already several projects for end-to-end that have been orchestrated end-to-end. I think in terms of challenges, there are a few things. First of all, you have to integrate as an orchestrator, and definitely end-to-end with a lot of systems, and not everything is built to be automated yet. So that's sometimes that is a challenge. But on the other hand, it's also we are not a usual vendor. We are a real agile software company. So we also have an approach where we start from the service, and also have a test-driven approach. And that's also something where we noticed in the beginning we had to find a way how we can collaborate and to get to a success. But in that sense, that really worked well. And in terms of benefits, I think these services can be delivered now on demand from a self-service portal. In a few minutes, they are available. Also, this test-driven approach is really useful for making changes, or if you're adding extensions to verify whether things are still working as it should be. Or if we change something, or another vendor where we integrate with, there are changes or different versions that we can quickly verify while running these tests that everything is still working properly, and then we can push this to production as soon as possible.
Yeah. And Eric mentioned MEF. Is that something that you're involved in at all as well?
Yeah, for sure. We're involved with MEF because we're also involved with TM Forum, Etsy, but of course, we think APIs are really important for the interoperability, and with TM Forum does that a good job. MEF is actually building further on many things from TM Forum, but also defining the payload, which is for us also important because you can define the envelope, but you still have to know what are you talking about. So that's really what MEF is also doing quite well. So we're also really involved there.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah. So Oliver, Verizon, obviously big mobile operator in the US. Lots of consumer 5G offerings since I think 2019. Is that right? Yeah. So obviously that's quite mature, but you're more focused on the enterprise services side here in Europe. And what sort of opportunities do you see for 5G for Verizon Enterprise, and also what, if any, new orchestration challenges does that pose?
And actually, I'm lucky enough to work in the global organisation, so it's US as well. But we are very focused, as many people in the 5G space are, in how we can monetize through the business channels. As consumer 5G will come on over time, but I don't think it's people in general, apart from maybe the broadband use case, don't need that much bandwidth right now, and don't have the use cases potentially right now. But in the business space, there's I talked earlier today that we're working with lots of verticals, lots of big companies. There's lots of incubators, lots of we have labs where we have a lot of partners come in and work with us. Of course, in 5G, it depends. Each country is dishing out the spectrum slightly differently, and how sometimes directly to businesses who will own the spectrum themselves if it's a private instance, and kind of going to the horse's mouth slightly, really to get used to the spectrum in theory faster. But we're working with car companies. Very big practice of ours is the car industry and autonomous vehicles as that matures, if you like. But manufacturing, we've got. I mentioned earlier today, I think we're working with how can you, for MEC and 5G, how can you have cleaner practices, if you like, in the pharmaceutical industry. So there's a lot with computer vision. So if you can learn what good looks like, one in particular case was gowning. So when you go into clean room environments, you must gown. Not antiseptic, what's the word I'm looking for? But anyway, the very clean gowning. But you need 3D vision really to look, have you done that properly? Has it been done properly? Same with manufacturing. We work with big consultants on how do you automatically detect defective goods and remove them from the production line. And I mentioned quite a few use cases to do with Southampton ports that we're doing. We've got a lot of venues that we're working with. That's about automatic queuing or queue management, frictionless payment, frictionless ticketing, all of these things. So 5G is part of it, of course. MEC, if you like, or whatever you like to process on site for speed, security, is another part of it. And then orchestrating, you know, that big word, is whether that's our orchestration platforms. We have an approach to orchestration of how we're going to do service orchestration, or whether or not you're connecting to other third parties, is still, you know, it's a big challenge. It's still, and, you know, previously I've seen, you know, just looking at networks, say, just working with the MEF, we did carrier-to-carrier orchestration, and we did some demonstrations in our labs in London about 6 or 7 years ago, showing, you know, just automatically provisioning Ethernet circuits and expanding the bandwidth of Ethernet circuits between carriers. So that's moving, you know, perhaps to what's been talked about quite slowly in some ways, but it needs to happen, you know, and the more that we can orchestrate between us and other third parties and other carriers, you know, the quicker it'll be there for customers.
Mm-hmm. And do you see, Eric, any opportunities there for your business in terms of enabling these sort of enterprise use cases for 5G? Perhaps the massive machine-time communications?
Well, we don't. What we believe is going to be impacting is that the roaming scenarios for 5G will require local breakouts. So in the past, there was a lot of talk that if you would be roaming in Thailand, for instance, you would use the Thai internet, but this has a lot of implications. You would have your Google in Thai, you would have a lot of the services would be very localized. So historically, it was always, the traffic was always carried back to the home network in a roaming scenario. This will have to change. So this also means from our perspective that we will have to deploy more in the cloud in order to be more regionalized, so that if someone is otherwise you don't get the speeds, right? Yeah. So the latency drives, if the protocol stacks remain more or less the same, the latency drives the throughput speed, so you will no longer be able to stream HD video if you're, let's say, on holiday in Australia and you would be forced to go through your home network. There is a need for different solutions for that. Now, how that then will work in practice, like with the localization, because of course, if you go to England, it's clear. I mean, everybody understands English, but if you're Swiss and you get Google Espanol, it's a lot more difficult. And today, this information is kept in database like MaxMind. And Google themselves, they will look at what kind of web pages are usually opened from this IP address. And this is a massive challenge for making a breakout work in a way that's for residential users. Now, for enterprise users, you can maybe steer this much better. They probably have only need for a local connection to the cloud. We are actually a partner for the big hyperscalers to put in place direct interconnection. So we will use that in combination with our localized packet gateways to break out enterprises to the cloud where needed. But the internet scenarios there are a bit more difficult. You'll have to look at endpoint security, SD1 directly coming from everyone's phone, etc. So that's, for the 5G roaming scenarios, a challenge ahead.
Yeah. And Oliver, coming back to some of the enterprise applications of 5G you were talking about earlier, are these private mobile networks that have been set up? Or are you acting as an MVNO and getting a slice of a public network?
No, not an MVNO model. At the moment, they're private instances that we're implementing, and of course, all things are on the table. But it's mainly the private deployment. So. In a sense, it's a closed user group anyway. So the orchestration as such is at the moment, each location is relatively independent. You're looking at a port, but would you repeat it on other ports? But roaming wouldn't be specifically an issue in that case. It's more about repeating what you do in one site. But of course, over time, one can imagine this will grow. And getting experiences to be repeatable in more than one location, with the need for low latency, etc., means that we will hit those roaming challenges. So, over time that will grow. But no, I think right now, most large operators are just looking to see what they can do at the edge, you know, in a private setting, and then it blends into, well, what is IoT, or what is the business practice that you're dealing with, and you know, some companies are very aware what they want to do, or way ahead in having trials of what they would like in their, if they're relatively large, you know, R&D type companies. Others maybe not retail. Some retail are pretty advanced, but some companies don't really have a clue, you know, what a new digital world will look like, you know, and need us to try and bring the answers.
Well, I was going to ask, do your enterprise customers, are they familiar with this topic of service orchestration, or is it just something that happens in the background that you take care of for them?
Well, I'm not sure if it's a good or bad thing if they've heard of service orchestration when we go and visit them. I often say that one of the problems is we're selling to our own kind, you know, and that's nobody's fault. That's just the nature of new technology, right? And but you know, we want them to have a vision of what they want to do. If I take like high-end retail, you know, there's some very high-end retail brands who want to be digital leaders in what goes on in a store, and are all over the idea of what could be a new digital augmented experience in the store, around the store. I'm working with, you know, people like TikTok and other social media giants who can bring people to their store, and turns out there's quite a lot of rich people who use TikTok, so what do I know? And you know, so some have a strong sense of what they really want to do, which is good. At least your starting point of outcomes there, and then we come along and say, well, you can realise that with a whole range of technologies, you know, and then orchestrating it. That's, you know, then we just have to work out the degree to which they want to have control over it, or it's a turnkey solution, which, you know, a lot of things for us are managed services at the moment, so we'll put that in place.
Yeah. And Stefan,
yeah, I
please.
think it's 5G and a private 5G and all the different flavors, because you can have private 5G where there is an on-premise part, there is a part maybe fully owned by the operator. So there are so many different flavors, and I think there the service orchestration, it should be quite flexible to support all these scenarios, but also in a way that you can do it in a maintainable way, because if you have to do it differently for every enterprise, it's not going to happen, and then going to cost so much money. So it's really about being able to reuse things and quickly have these different variations and deliver them to your customer. And maybe some customers have their own orchestrator for their part, and they want to delegate a network part to the operator. Others, I don't want anything about that. I just want a service delivery to me. So there's a lot of different flavors, and I think there the value of orchestration and service orchestration will only come when these kind of use cases are showing up. I think now it's just about delivering something on demand, or other simple cases, in my opinion, still, but the real things, that's for the next few years.
Sure. I don't know if we're allowed to take audience questions, but if anyone does have one, please feel free to shout out. But if not, you touched on, or somebody mentioned hyperscalers. Obviously, this is something that's front of mind for everyone. Where does that fit into service orchestration for an operator that's perhaps providing a service that includes some elements of public cloud, whether that's an edge cloud element or something else? Just wondered if Oliver, Stefan... Well,
we love them and we think they're brilliant. So that's...
Can we quote you on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, no, look... the hyperscalers and telcos are really two sides of the same coin, if you like. If you take a much broader view, we're building out this great big digital platform globally, and they've come up with a great business model, like IKEA did with big stores at the edge of town, you know, and now they're moving to local IKEAs, like IKEA are, a customer of ours, and you know, and local shops, you know, which they aren't as experienced in, because the traditional hyperscaler model is brilliant, but it's the economy of scale model, really. And that's great. So, and they should leave the ugly stuff and the real world stuff, the edge as it gets called now, or I just call it the real world that's been there for years, because there have been data centers and sites and equipment and pipes and poles and all the ugly stuff and regulation that we've been doing for years. But as they move towards that and decentralize their model, that's not where they're most comfortable. So we're working out together with them, you know, what is the best way to play. Now that, you know, they have great IT, and people like using it. And although that IT will grow in debt as it gets more complicated, their model, of course, like any IT will. So, but at the moment, the momentum's with them, and any orchestration capabilities that they're building is great as far as we're concerned. I mean, at the end of the day, for all the talk, we will mostly make our money for certainly in many cases on infrastructure. So, we just want to put out more infrastructure at the edge, near the edge, by the edge. It's true the secret sauce is orchestration, if you like, and scaling. But again, scaling at the edge is not the same thing as scaling inside a data center, Scaling when you have, what's the difference between the edge and a data center? Well, it has different resource constraints. It has different power, different resiliency, different, and if you're going to scale that and spread that over multiple sites, as to your model, to your point, and do that in a consistent and low-cost way, well, that's really what networks have been doing for quite some time. So over time, that plays into our sort of engineering strengths, but we're not there yet.
Okay. And Stefan, you must have some view on the hyperscalers and what you've learned from their architectures has informed your service orchestration.
Yeah, I think we as a company apply many of those techniques actually, but I see them, for us it's just another environment we can talk to or integrate with. So for us it's they have APIs that are used to, that are meant to be automated or to talk to with an orchestrator. So it's actually for us really easy to integrate with them. But whether it's with a cloud provider or locally, or you want to be able to migrate, have a hybrid cloud environment, multi-cloud, these are all things that should be possible. And that's where we see the value of orchestration, where also the operator can still be in control, like deciding where I want to deploy things, and maybe be able in the future even to switch between cloud providers, that you're not locked into one, but at least you have this flexibility. So there I see something for the operators need to
if I can just pick up on that just very quickly, just take Kubernetes. How easy is it to manage Kubernetes clusters across multiple different cloud providers? And the answer is it isn't. And Kubernetes underneath, a great operating system, probably the de facto one that's emerging now, in the whole of the like Linux almost really. And but managing that, well, I would say this because we've got a product, or we found a product, should I say, that does management of that, which you could call orchestration across multiple different Kubernetes clusters. Now that's something you would have thought that Google, Amazon, others would have solved easily, but they haven't. They have examples like Anthos and other things that do something okay, but even that layer is not easy to orchestrate. So I think
it's indeed across this cluster, but not everything fits in Kubernetes also.
Well, not everything even fits.
Everyone said, Kubernetes will now solve the world, solve all problems, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's built for specific type of application, and your application is not built for it.
Exactly.
It's not the right solution, but it's like we said, it's really good in what it has to do. It's container orchestration, but who's going to connect those different clusters? Who's going to make sure that everything is still consistent and is still connected with a legacy that is maybe somewhere else, or certain things that you don't want to deploy there?
That's right.
That's where I think the service orchestrator glues everything together.
I have a less optimistic outlook for the operators. To be honest, I mean, when you talk to Microsoft and they said, well, we needed some telco knowledge, so they acquired Metaswitch, 1,500 people. That's a scale that no operator can match. If a hyperscaler commits their thought on a specific domain, they can go with the level of investment that very few operators can match. If you look at how far they are in AI, I mean, you can upload a video recording. It will tell you how happy you are, right? You can do this. You upload a picture on Azure, and it will tell you your age, whether you're wearing glasses, color eyes, whether you're happy even. That's built in. Imagine they applying that kind of methodology to running a data center. It's a level of orchestration and sophistication that I don't think an operator will be able to replicate. However, while the hyperscaler started with a relatively easy business model of virtualization, it has become so complex that it has become a set of libraries like you would have had a .NET environment or all of these. I still remember the binders full of CD-ROMs coming from Microsoft with all their different products. I mean, the cloud is not much different. It's just an online catalog and no longer a physical one. And likely, operators will compete with service integrators on implementing vertical scenarios using these building blocks, and to the varying degrees use their established networks. For us, it will be the international one. For local operators, it will be their national granularity. But the compute side, I think it's going to be very hard to keep the hyperscalers out. Yeah. They've won this.
Okay. Well, I preferred it when Oliver was talking about IKEA stores. And that analogy I liked, because I'm not quite sure what the operators would be. Would they be their local grocer or a hardware store?
Yeah. Have I expanded that analogy? Well, you know, as they move to local stores, so, you know, whether that's Tesco's local or Metro or whatever, you know, what are you building towards? I mean, what the networks do, they traditionally connect islands of compute, you know. Now, people wanted compute more and more and more, so they built lots of it, and then they realized it's damn expensive. And the cloud guys came along and said, well, we've got these big IKEA stores where you can go and get all this. Now, as that distributes, because it's a great resource and it's a great model, there's no doubt, and they've got lots of money, there's no doubt about it, and they can do lots of data science, bless them. But as that resource, economic resource, is more and more valuable, it spreads back to, look, you should do computing where, you should use any resource in the place where it happens. It's in fact an anomaly to send data and do computing far away from you. You know, it breaks security paradigms, age-old security paradigms. It breaks economic paradigms to send things a distance and bring them back again, and it's not good engineering, really. You know, so in general, this cloud computing is a brilliant model, but it needs to distribute, right? And the skills needed to distribute complicated technology aren't. Well, they exist more prevalently in telcos than they do in the hyperscalers. That's not to say that hyperscalers couldn't just buy out. I mean, the question might be, why haven't hyperscalers bought out telcos in the past? Because it's ugly, because they don't want to be regulated, and because it's best left to a bunch of other people. Well, over time, I think that there will be some sort of.
They have bigger networks than most operators.
Well, yeah, they've got lots of fiber. Yeah, I'll give them that. You know, they've been buying fiber for a long time, but that's like investing in gold. I would lay my bets off as well if I were them. So yeah, they've got great networks. I think they grow their networks as at the edge we develop service capabilities in the same way. But yeah, two sides of the same coin.
Gentlemen, I think we've slightly overrun, so okay. I'd like to thank our panelists today for a great session.
Thank you. Thank you.
And we'll hand back to Mark now. Thank you very much.